They were called the families. They lived by a code older than the country itself, and for nearly a century, they ran America from the shadows. Every week, we open the files on the men who built the underworld, the bosses, the wars, the rituals, the betrayals, the blood oaths that bound them, and the secrets they swore to take to the grave. Subscribe. Some stories were never meant to be told.
The aftermath of the last great New York mob war. Step right into the blood-soaked aftermath of the last great New York mob war of the 20th century. The fierce dynastic struggle that ripped the Colombo family apart had finally ground to a halt, leaving behind a staggering toll of casualties and convictions. 42 loyalists of Carmen the Snake Persico and 16 men from the rebel Arena faction were locked away by the authorities. The government essentially handed the crown back to Persico by slapping his rival, Victor Arena, with a life sentence, clearing the path for Carmen's son, Alphonse Little Alley Boy Persico, to take the throne once he was paroled. While the streets of Brooklyn ran red with blood, the mastermind of this slaughter was living the good life out on the West Coast. Locked away for life in a Lompoc, California, penitentiary, Carmen Persico viewed the war as an absolute, unqualified triumph. The ruthless godfather passed his days tending to a pristine rose garden and founding an Italian cultural club, where imprisoned killers, extortionists, and drug dealers threw birthday feasts and reminisced about their street days. From his sunny California cell, the Snake smiled, believing his lifelong dream of forging an untouchable Mafia dynasty through his son was finally secure. But Little Alley Boy was a deeply flawed prince. Federal prosecutors saw him as a classic wannabe who craved his father's terrifying respect but simply barked orders like a tyrant. His anticipated parole in 1993 was stopped dead in its tracks by prosecutor George Stamboulides, who suspected the younger Persico of orchestrating a chilling hit from behind bars. The victim was Michael Devine, a Staten Island bartender who made the fatal mistake of dating Little Alley Boy's wife, Dory. Devine was shot to death, and his genitalia were mutilated, a gruesome underworld calling card signaling the deadly price of becoming intimate with a Cosa Nostra spouse. Eventually, Alphonse walked out of prison in 1995 as a free man, crowned as either the official or acting boss of the fractured Colombo Empire. To project a united front, he offered a supposed olive branch to the defeated Arena faction by appointing William Wild Bill Cutolo as his underboss. Cutolo, a heavy-hitting labor racketeer who famously sported a large cowboy hat, had commanded an Arena crew during the war and survived numerous assassination attempts. But the Persicos had long memories and no capacity for forgiveness. On May 26, 1999, just days before his 50th birthday, Wild Bill vanished without a trace. His family knew immediately that Persico's man had executed him in a delayed act of wartime vengeance, deliberately making his corpse disappear to maximize his relative's suffering. However, the Persicos underestimated the wrath of a grieving son. Wild Bill's 30-year-old son, William Jr., silently swore to obliterate the man who took his father. In a stunning move, the young Cutolo approached the FBI, strapped a mini voice recorder to his chest, and seamlessly infiltrated the Colombo ranks as an eager associate. Dubbed Operation Payback, his undercover work provided the feds with the golden key they needed to bring the syndicate to its knees. Armed with Cutolo's intelligence, agents stormed the Brooklyn apartment of Little Alley Boy's daughter. They tore through the place and found the jackpot hidden inside a kitchen stove hood, computer disks, loan sharking records, a crucial cellular phone, and $25,000 in cash tucked into a shoebox and a mattress. The ledgers proved that the younger Persico was raking in vigorish on the $1 million loan shark empire that Wild Bill Cutolo had managed right up until the day he was wiped off the map. Cornered by the staggering weight of the evidence and facing a potential 70 years in prison, Little Alley Boy crumbled. In late 2001, he threw in the towel and pleaded guilty to a sweeping RICO indictment that included racketeering, money laundering, and loan sharking. To secure a 13-year sentence and a $1 million forfeiture, Alphonse did the unthinkable. He shattered the sacred code of omerta. Standing in a federal courtroom, the broken boss explicitly admitted his high-ranking leadership role in the Mafia enterprise, publicly dishonoring his father's cherished rules of silence. Sentencing him, federal judge Rina Raji branded him a very dangerous man, declaring her belief that there was absolutely no crime he wouldn't commit. It was a pathetic end that had been predicted years earlier. Back in 1986, Judge John Keenan had warned Little Alley Boy that he would be a chump to stay in the mob life. At that same hearing, Keenan lectured his father, Carmen, calling the elder Persico a tragedy and one of the most intelligent people he had ever seen. In the end, Carmen the Snake's egotistical obsession with cementing a royal bloodline left his beloved family in absolute ruins. His deceitful manipulations sparked a bloodbath that claimed at least 12 lives and resulted in the convictions of more than 70 hierarchy members, soldiers, and associates. As the new century dawned, the once mighty Colombo Borgata was a shattered shell of its former glory, reduced to a mere 75 surviving, unjailed made men, its leaders locked in cages, and its dark dreams of a criminal dynasty permanently reduced to ashes. Step right into the smoky, secretive confines of the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club in South Ozone Park, Queens. It is mid-January 1986, barely a month after the spectacular sidewalk assassination of Paul Castellano, and John Gotti has just violently seized the throne of the nation's largest mafia dynasty. Unbeknownst to the newly crowned Gambino godfather, hidden New York State microphones are capturing his every whisper. Pondering his violent coup, Gotti envisions an untouchable criminal empire. "If I can get a year run without being interrupted," his rumbling voice echoes on the wiretap, "gonna put this thing together where they could never break it, never destroy it." When a companion notes it would be a hell of a legacy to leave, Gotti entirely agrees. To understand how this ruthless predator clawed his way to the top of the underworld, you have to look at his gritty origins. Raised in grinding poverty, the teenage Gotti found his true calling at a local storefront hangout run by capo Carmen Fatico. To Gotti, Fatico's crew of wise guys, flush with cash and driving massive cars, represented an elite, privileged society he was desperate to join. Gotti's early rap sheet was the standard resume of a street thug, brawling, carrying guns, and petty burglaries, including a 1965 arrest where a Suffolk County cop caught him breaking into a tavern with a crowbar. He even dodged the military draft on the exact day President John F. Kennedy was assassinated, later telling the FBI he thought his marriage to his wife Vicky and his criminal record made him exempt. The big money started rolling in when Fatico moved the crew's operations to South Ozone Park, a stone's throw from JFK Airport. The airport was the ultimate underworld prize, handling hundreds of millions in cargo, and Gotti, alongside his brother Gene and close pal Angelo Ruggiero, quickly became hijacking heavyweights. With a menacing temper and an aggressive streak, Gotti earned the terrifying nicknames Black John and Crazy Horse. Prison time only hardened him. Sent to Lewisburg Penitentiary, the young upstart had the sheer audacity to confront Carmen Galante, the fearsome boss of the Bonanno family. Gotti demanded that Galante stop hoarding the smuggled steaks and booze he bribed guards to bring in, insisting that Don share his illicit bounty with the other incarcerated wise guys. Galante was so impressed by Gotti's ironclad nerve that he tried to recruit him, only to be disappointed when he learned Gotti already belonged to Neil. Later, at Greenhaven Prison, where he served a shockingly brief 2-year stint for his role in the murder of James McBratney, Gotti completely controlled Mafia Row, leaving the facility with an engraved plaque from his adoring fellow inmates, "To a great guy, John Gotti." From the boys at Greenhaven. Paroled in 1972, Gotti's start was on the rise. With Fatico facing loan-sharking indictments, Gotti was promoted to acting capo. But it was Aniel O'Neill Della Croce, the brutal Gambino underboss, who truly molded Gotti. Holding court at the Bunker-like Ravenite social club in Little Italy, Della Croce was an old-school enforcer with the frigid glare of a killer. Della Croce filled Gotti's head with blood-soaked tales of his days serving under Albert Anastasia, the founder of Murder Incorporated, inspiring Gotti to adopt Anastasia as his ultimate role model. By 1977, Gotti was an officially made man and the undisputed capo of the Bergen crew. His rising power demanded a new level of respect. Terrified underlings dropped the Black John moniker in favor of Johnny Boy or the good-looking guy. But beneath the custom-tailored suits beat the heart of a savage. When an associate named Anthony Moscatiello failed to return his calls, police wiretaps caught Gotti exploding in a homicidal rage. "I'll blow you and your fucking house up," Gotti screamed, warning Moscatiello that if his wife ignored the phone again, "I'll fucking kill you. This is not a fucking game." When a veteran NYPD detective later confronted Gotti, revealing that his headquarters was bugged and his vicious threats were on tape, the mobster showed zero remorse for his crimes. The only thing that caused Gotti to look genuinely troubled was the realization that the bugs had caught him casually insulting boss Paul Castellano and disrespectfully referring to his beloved mentor, Della Croce, by the forbidden slur the Polak. While Gotti basked in his blood-soaked ascension, the federal government was quietly setting the stage for a spectacular showdown. Just 4 miles away from Gotti's Queens headquarters, the FBI was assembling a new Gambino squad under the command of J. Bruce Mau. The stage was set for a high-stakes duel between two men of entirely different worlds, the loud, boastful, and violently defiant Gotti, and the reserved, relentlessly disciplined federal agent who was determined to wipe Gotti's legacy off the map. Step right into the high-stakes, deadly game of cat and mouse that tore the nation's largest mafia family apart from the inside out. On one side of this underworld war was the quintessential G-man, J. Bruce Mau. A square-jawed, 6'3" farm boy from Iowa, Mau was a decorated former Navy officer who tracked Soviet nuclear subs during the Cold War. When he took command of the FBI's Gambino Squad, known as C-16, he found their intelligence files completely bare, relying on dusty information from the 1960s. Mau immediately purged the desk jockeys and demanded his agents hit the streets, earning him the nickname Chairman Mau. He demanded his team develop fresh informants, declaring that you don't build cases by sitting around an office waiting for tips. On the other side of the battle lines was the Gambino family's biggest liability, a man whose non-stop mouth earned him the moniker Quack-Quack. Angelo Ruggiero was a loyal mobster, but every other Sunday, he would visit the Staten Island mansion of Gambino boss Paul Castellano, and the moment he returned to his own home, he would hit the phones to blab every detail of the Godfather's private conversations to John Gotti and other mobsters. Ruggiero's obsessive, loose-lipped chatter was an absolute goldmine for Mau's agents, handing the FBI the vital probable cause they needed to legally bug the homes of both Castellano and the feared underboss Neil Della Croce. Fat Angie also unwittingly gave the FBI a front-row seat to John Gotti's daily life, as agents listened to Ruggiero call Gotti every day around noon to wake him up from his late-night gambling and partying. The FBI's electronic eavesdropping hit the ultimate jackpot in the spring of 1982 when Ruggiero's brother, a major heroin trafficker, died in a plane crash. Hidden microphones in Ruggiero's dinette captured him discussing his takeover of his dead brother's drug network, using the mob code word for heroin, Babania. This careless chatter ultimately led to a federal narcotics indictment against Ruggiero, John Gotti's brother Gene, and other crew members. Through a corrupt mole, Ruggiero soon discovered his home had been bugged, prompting the arrogant gangster to issue foul-mouthed threats against an FBI agent. But Ruggiero had a much deadlier problem than the federal government, his own boss. Paul Castellano absolutely forbade drug dealing and incessantly demanded that Ruggiero hand over the legal discovery tapes so the Godfather could hear exactly what was being said on them. Knowing the tapes would sign their death warrants, Gotti and Ruggiero flat-out refused to surrender them. Underboss Neil Della Croce tried desperately to mediate the terrifying standoff, warning Ruggiero that his refusal to hand over the tapes to Castellano was going to ignite a bloody internal war. When the ailing Della Croce died in late 1985, John Gotti knew Castellano was going to strike, so he decided to hit the boss first. Gotti orchestrated a treacherous, preemptive coup without the required approval from the Mafia Commission. He used Ruggiero to recruit Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano and Frank DeCicco, forming a five-man conspiratorial hit squad they dramatically dubbed the Fist. The climax of this brewing bloodbath unfolded on the evening of December 16, 1985, right in the heart of midtown Manhattan. Gotti deployed an 11-man assassination team wearing white trench coats and Russian-style fur hats to blend into the winter crowds outside Sparks Steakhouse. As Castellano and his new underboss Thomas Bellotti pulled up to the restaurant, the shooters descended upon them in a sudden, brutal flash of gunfire. Watching the bloody execution from the tinted windows of a parked Lincoln Town car half a block away were the architects of the coup, John Gotti and Sammy Gravano. The sensational hit stunned the underworld and law enforcement alike, cementing a violent change in power that would forever alter the history of the American Mafia. Step right into the chaotic, high-stakes turf war where the newly crowned king of the underworld, John Gotti, had a giant bullseye painted on his custom-tailored back. It is early 1986. And Gotti has just surged to the absolute top of the FBI's must-get list, sparking a frantic, almost comical race among law enforcement agencies. You had the FBI, federal prosecutors from both Brooklyn and Manhattan, the Queens District Attorney's Office, and the State Organized Crime Task Force literally stumbling over each other in their separate quests to nail him. In their desperate rush to gather evidence, agents from different agencies were independently sneaking into Gotti's Queens headquarters, the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club, to plant bugs without even knowing their rivals were doing the exact same thing. The state investigators managed to hit the jackpot by targeting a separate office behind a red door next to the Bergen, a private sanctuary where Gotti felt secure enough to conduct his most sensitive mafia business. The hidden microphones, wired directly into his private phones, captured the raw, unfiltered ascension of a mob dictator. Investigators listened as Gotti met with Angelo Ruggiero, officially selecting Frank DeChico as his underboss and brazenly decreeing a temporary ban on inducting any new soldiers into the family. "These guys are going to be in for a shock," Gotti chortled on the wiretap, telling Ruggiero that for 6 months to a year, they wouldn't make a single new member. Asserting his newfound supreme authority, Gotti even announced he was abandoning the Bergen in Queens to permanently shift his daily headquarters to the legendary Ravenite Club in the heart of Little Italy, declaring, "I'll die there." But while the feds were listening, Gotti was putting on a masterclass in courtroom intimidation. When he went to trial in state court for a relatively minor assault charge involving a refrigeration mechanic named Romuald P. Syke, the terrifying aura of the new Godfather worked its dark magic. On the witness stand, the previously battered victim miraculously suffered a total bout of amnesia, claiming he couldn't remember who attacked him, prompting a tabloid to run the legendary, mocking headline, "I forgotti." The charges were voided without the jury even needing to deliberate. Gotti swaggered out of the courthouse alongside his fierce, barrel-chested lawyer, Bruce Cutler, absolutely soaking up the flashbulbs and television cameras. Yet, while Gotti was playing the untouchable celebrity for the press, the underworld was brewing a lethal, unprecedented counterstrike. To consolidate his power over crews still loyal to the murdered Paul Castellano, Gotti scheduled a pep talk for Sunday, April 13, 1986, at the Veterans and Friends Club in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. This was the heavily fortified base of James Fala, a capo who ran the city's lucrative garbage carting rackets and proudly displayed a poster of a cockroach wearing a headset with the caption "Our bugs have ears." In a twist of fate that likely saved his life, Gotti cancelled his appearance at the last minute. But his underboss, Frank DeChico, wasn't so lucky. As DeChico approached his parked car across the street from Fala's club, a devastating, remote-controlled bomb blew him to pieces. The assassination sent shockwaves through the underworld. American mafiosi traditionally abhorred explosives because they injured innocent bystanders and invited crushing police heat. Gotti was left baffled and paranoid, tightening his security cordon, completely unaware of who possessed the audacity to use a bomb against his inner circle. The explosive murder generated such a massive media frenzy that a federal judge had to postpone Gotti's impending racketeering trial in Brooklyn by 4 months to ensure an untainted jury. Throughout the pre-trial circus, Gotti charmed the press, opening doors for female reporters and delivering his famous soundbite when asked if he was a godfather, "I'm the boss of my family, my wife and my kids." But the FBI, constantly tracking his movements, knew that this devoted family man image was a complete fraud. Underneath the sharp suits and the media-friendly smile, Gotti was brazenly violating the Cosa Nostra's sacred code of honor by carrying on an illicit affair with the illegitimate daughter of his late mentor, Neil Della Croce, a woman who was already married to another mafia gangster. It was an offense punishable by death in the underworld, proving once again that for the new Don, the rules simply did not apply. Step right into the flashbulb-popping, high-stakes circus of the late 1980s, where a Teflon-coated mobster tried to sell himself to the American public as a modern-day folk hero. For the first time since seizing power, John Gotti was unencumbered by pending trials or the threat of jail, and he was entirely convinced of his own myth. Basking in the media spotlight, Gotti told his confidant, Sammy the Bull Gravano, "This is my public, Sammy. They love me." Gravano noted that his boss truly viewed himself as a heroic figure genuinely admired by New Yorkers. Gotti's defense attorneys expertly fed reporters tales of his endearing, charitable nature, highlighting how he personally funded 4th of July block parties with free food and fireworks, strutted through the streets in an immaculate white suit, and even donated $10,000 to a local hospital. But seasoned investigators knew this charming Robin Hood persona was a fraudulent mask disguising a narcissistic tyrant with an incendiary temper. Beneath the custom-tailored suits, Gotti was ruthlessly breaking the underworld's own rules. While previous bosses hypocritically banned narcotics but took a secret cut of their profits, Gotti openly met with suspected big-time drug dealers like his brother Gene and Angelo Ruggiero. And his vengeance was chillingly absolute. Take the case of Willie Boy Johnson, a disgraced FBI informer who had been cast out of the mob. Gotti had explicitly sworn on the memory of his dead son that there would be no deadly retaliation against Johnson. Yet, 16 months later, Johnson was ambushed on his way to work and struck by 6 bullets at close range. When a reporter asked for his reaction to the slaughter, Gotti coldly quipped, "Well, we all gotta go sometime." Gotti demanded that his soldiers share his arrogant defiance, ordering them never to skulk or look repentant if arrested, but instead to dress expensively, wear jewelry, and act like fucking lions and tigers. Yet, the FBI wasn't buying the act. Jules Benavolata, an organized crime supervisor, publicly branded Gotti a former two-bit hijacker and a degenerate gambler, a nod to the fact that the supposedly brilliant boss was known to blow up to $300,000 on sports bets in a single weekend. But the money kept rolling in to cover his staggering losses. Gravano alone was kicking up $2 million a year to Gotti, representing 80% of his personal shakedowns in the construction industry. But Gotti's real problems weren't just the feds, he was a target within the underworld itself. The FBI bugged a Hoboken restaurant and overheard the Genovese family plotting to assassinate Gotti and his brother Gene. Obligated to warn him, FBI supervisor Bruce Mau showed up at Gotti's Howard Beach home. Gotti came to the door in a bathrobe, calmed his fiercely barking Rottweiler, and laughed off the death threat, claiming, "I got no problems. I got nothing to worry about. Thanks, fellas." But his smug smile vanished the second Mau added, "It's the West Side, the universally understood code for Vincent Chin Gigante's lethal Greenwich Village territory." Law enforcement's patience with Gotti's antics finally ran out during a wintry walk-talk in Little Italy. A car screeched to a halt, and old-school state investigator Joe Coffey shoved Gotti face forward against a wall. Feeling a metallic object during the frisk, Coffey growled, "Are you wearing a gun, you cocksucker?" To which Gotti coolly replied, "It's only my belt buckle." Gotti was hauled in and put on trial in state court for ordering the shooting of Carpenters Union leader John O'Connor. The trial was a theatrical spectacle. Gotti treated the courtroom like a runway, parading in double-breasted silk suits and floral ties, while his co-defendant, an inconsequential bookie named Anthony Guerrieri, sat beside him looking absurd in chartreuse and fire engine red jackets. Prosecutors played damning tapes of Gene Gotti whispering about the hit, and brought in James Patrick McElroy, a ruthless Westie hitman with a rap sheet full of murders and knifings, to testify against the Dapper Don. Incredibly, the jury acquitted him again. It was his third acquittal in 4 years, and his home turf of South Ozone Park exploded in a carnival of celebration, with red balloons, pennants, and signs declaring "Congratulations John and Tony. We love you." The Teflon Don seemed untouchable, a mythic figure in the eyes of his neighborhood. But the celebration would be his final victory lap. Watching the circus, the FBI's Jules Benevolente issued a chilling promise to the press: "The FBI hasn't brought a case against Gotti yet. When we do, he can take all the bets he wants, because he's going away to prison for a long time."